will have no trouble developing a considerable military force over the course of, as you said, 5-10 years. And that is something that most Americans would welcome. But the real issue, of course, is not perpetuating the military division of Europe or the military confrontation that has resulted in war in Ukraine. The real issue is how to develop a political solution to Europe's security issues such that defense spending both in Russia and in the rest of Europe can be modest and moderate, while both feel secure. And the Europeans do not have to depend on the United States as they have for the last 80 years. So it's a good development that the Germans and others are greatly increasing defense spending and trying to take charge of their own destiny. It will take them 5 to 10 years to achieve very much of anything. But it really isn't the major issue. The major issue is, what is the security architecture in Europe? What are the understandings under the Commission on Security and Cooperation in Europe, or the United Nations, or both, involving Russia and NATO? What are the parameters of a stable peace in Europe? Ukraine, as a neutral country, would be at the center of this. But mere Ukrainian neutrality is not enough. There have to be further understandings and a broader agreement. And we're nowhere near that. As I said, there is no peace in Ukraine. There's not even a ceasefire. There are one-sided offers of ceasefires, first from Mr. Zelensky, under the prodding of the United States, second from Mr. Putin, again with as a result of the United States conducting a dialogue with him. But these ceasefire proposals don't match. Zelensky proposes a stand down on Russian attack on not just on energy infrastructure, which Mr. Putin is prepared to agree to, but on ports and railroads and other infrastructure. And Mr. Putin, for his part, is not prepared to accept continuing long-range strikes by Ukraine at facilities in his own country. So there are offers, partial ceasefires. The partial ceasefires don't match. There is no ceasefire. And it's hardly surprising in these circumstances that long-range strikes by both sides continue. The final point here is that, of course, the incentives for the Russians to agree to a ceasefire are much less than those for Ukraine. Ukraine is losing the war. Ukraine is losing territory. Ukraine is run out of military manpower. Ukraine is depopulated. It's deindustrialized. It's weakened. Its democracy has disappeared. Its corruption continues to flourish. Russia is gaining ground, not losing it. And while Russia may, like Ukraine, have a system which is heavy on financial oligarchs and most unjust in terms of income distribution, with the top 1% skimming off vastly too much of the wealth, Russia is not on the ropes like Ukraine. And if the war continues, it will simply continue to take more territory, kill more Ukrainians, and it can absorb the losses on its own side. So a ceasefire is not something the Russians want in and of itself. What they want is a peace. And a ceasefire as part of a peace, they have said, is entirely acceptable. But at the moment, there's no agreement on what a peace or European security architecture would look like. And there's no agreement that Ukraine will be neutral, by Ukraine anyway.
Do you think that Russia is interested in the aftermath of a Ukrainian settlement, is interested in dividing the western part of Ukraine in various ethnicities, or that would be a danger for them in terms of Romanians, for example? They can put weapons in that part, and they can
So
come
I
back.
think they want a general rollback of forward deployed weapons against them. Some elements of this are obviously negotiable. That is to say, but I don't think the neutrality of Ukraine and the disarming of Ukraine in terms of foreign hostile forces on Ukrainian territory is negotiable. The level of armed force that Ukraine might maintain is something that might be negotiated, but it's not going to involve foreign troops on Ukrainian soil. The Romanians, of course, are divided. You mentioned the Romanians. We've seen an election in Romania disallowed by the European Union, basically, through a court in Romania. So much for democracy. That is not a democratic approach. And so the damage that this conflict is doing, well, both conflicts, the one in Gaza is essentially has made American Zionists the most formidable enemies of our Constitution: freedom of speech, freedom from search and seizure, freedom from arbitrary actions by the government, a matter of the past. I mean, we have lost a great deal of our freedoms to pressure from the Zionist lobby. And I would say the corrosive effects of the Ukraine war in Europe in particular are evidenced by what just happened in Romania. Neither war is compatible with the kind of constitutional democracy that the West wants to stand for. So Mr. Trump is absolutely right. These wars should end. His answer for the war to end in Palestine is for the Palestinians to be annihilated. His answer in Ukraine is uncertain, but it does not involve the entry of Ukraine into NATO. It does not involve Ukraine recovering those territories, Crimea and the 4 eastern oblasts, that Russia has taken in whole or in part from Russia. And this is all very murky and unclear. I guess I will end by saying my own view is that Mr. Trump has an idea of a broad rapprochement and cooperation with Russia. And Ukraine is a sideshow in this context. It's a means to that end. It's not an end in itself. And so he's quite prepared to sacrifice Ukraine in the broader interest, the strategic interest of the United States in geopolitical and economic cooperation with a resource-rich Russia. I think he may be prepared to do the same with China. He may have some sort of idea of global order based on G3 or G4, maybe other countries, great powers running the world. This is not really novel. This is what Franklin Delano Roosevelt and Stalin had in mind, and Churchill after World War II. They included the French out of courtesy, and because the French had an empire in Africa and elsewhere. But basically, that concept was great powers running the world. Now, if this concept were applied, there'd probably be a few more, and maybe certainly India, I would think, and possibly Brazil, certainly maybe Japan, but maybe a group of countries, Arab League or African Union or something. And nobody knows, but I think Mr. Trump has in mind a fundamental reordering of global affairs to empower the great powers. And this means that a smaller country like Ukraine is a pawn on the chessboard.